I've got one flame to burn, one race that I can say I ran.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the TwoTim47.com podcast. My name is Keith Cartwright, and normally I am the host of this show, but today going to switch things up a little bit, do something a little bit different, and I am going to hand the mic over to my dear friend Jodi Stoner, who will be the interviewer today. I will be the interviewee, and Jodi's going to be interviewing me about my running journey in general, and then more specifically about some things she and I will be partnering on coming up in the near future, some rather adventurous runs, some very heartful and thoughtful ways of trying to reach out to love and respect others, and just really highlighting these stories of ours that God has found a way to weave together through running, really. So I look forward to this conversation, and what a lot of fun it is being on the other end of the mic with Jodi Stoner. But before I do that, I want to thank my dear friend Rachel Wood for sponsoring this particular episode of the TwoTim47.com podcast. Rachel supports me financially through the Patreon platform. Patreon is a place you can go to monthly financially support this show and really just creatives who are taking on different projects to make some sort of contribution and difference in the world, which is what I try to do with this podcast, TwoTim47.com, just trying to run some light to the darkness in the world, give folks some hope where they might not find it otherwise. And really, it's all hope that I have found in this running journey and in the stories of friends that I get to meet along the way. One of those is certainly Jodi Stoner, who, like I said, will be the host today. But one of those is Rachel Wood. Rachel I have met in this running journey. She has been a longtime supporter of my TwoTim47.com podcast. She's very mission-minded, does a lot of service in the community herself. So I think this was just a natural partnership for her and I to team up on this. So I'm grateful for her support all along. It's a boost. It's a confidence builder knowing that I have someone like her in my corner. If you are interested in learning more about Patreon, you can go to my website, TwoTim47.com, TWOTIM47.com, and click on the Support Me tab. And that will lead you to some information about Patreon and just some different ways where you can partner with me and support this mission. And today, that mission is going to be highlighted by, like I said, my dear friend Jodi Stoner. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this show over to Jodi. It's all yours, Jodi. Take it away.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the TwoTim47.com podcast. I'm Jodi Stoner, but my friends call me Run Jodi. I'm the guest host of this show today, and I'm really glad to have you along, listening in today, wherever it is that you're listening, and whenever it is you might be listening in. Today, the tables have been turned, and I'm thrilled to be the one on this side of the microphone, asking the questions to a man with a story. So, God has touched his life in a way that I don't think he ever imagined it would play out. Here's a little backstory. I've had the honor of being interviewed by Keith Cartwright, the host of this podcast, and he is an absolute joy that I met in Chicago last summer at the first ever Facebook Community Summit meeting. So Keith was there, and he was representing the Facebook group Meg Miles, and I have to tell you, as a runner, I was drawn to that group there, and not just because it was a running group, but because for me it was really personal. I remember back when it all happened in early 2014, through running clubs, social media, my friend circles, I heard about the tragic accident of Meg Miles. She was a runner. She was training for the Boston Marathon. She was hit by a car while out for a training run and killed. And everyone was running for her in her memory and her honor. And that was very powerful for me I never met her. I actually never heard of her before the day of her accident, but I ran for her and I connected emotionally and I connected spiritually with so many people across the country that were doing the same thing. So at this Facebook Summit meeting, I had to meet the people that were there representing Meg. I had to meet them in person, and I did. I also wanted to tell you that I was in Chicago because of my involvement in the Facebook group I Run for Michael, another running group. And I Run for Michael is pretty neat. It matches runners with a buddy, and a buddy is somebody who's unable to run due to a disability. So in the group, two people are matched, and then the runner dedicates all of their miles and their races to their buddy. And once you're matched, most runner buddy teams develop a friendship, relationship type thing. And that's exactly what's happened with me and my buddy. My buddy's name is River. He's almost 7 years old. I live in Florida. He lives in Mississippi. And together we are on a mission to teach the world about spina bifida. That is his disability. So it's easy to see how our paths would cross in Chicago. But Keith, I'd like to welcome you to the show. And I know that your running career, hobby that turned into a career, didn't begin in Chicago. So if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what inspired you to lace up your sneakers and take that first step.
Yeah. So, well, it's fun being on the being welcomed end of this podcast. So I'm grateful it's you over there, Jodi. And well, you kind of hit on where my running started. It started in about 4 years ago after Meg was hit and killed. I live in the same small county that Meg grew up in and lived in. And I mean, I was always fairly athletic in high school. I played sports. I ran track, but nothing ever further than a quarter mile. That was my distance race, a quarter mile. And that's sort of what I always thought of as distance. I thought the guys on the team who ran the mile and the 2 mile, those were the crazy guys. How could you ever think of running that far? But after high school, I did very little running. But obviously, when you talk about Meg and this outpouring of response, it was really a big story in our community. Like I said, I live in Hanover County. The whole county is probably 100,000 people and the whole deal. So it's a real rural place, tight knit. But I remember I was sitting in the local library here doing some work, and my wife texted me and she said, "Do you know Scott Menzies, who was Meg's husband?" And I texted back that I do. Scott was a police officer here in town. He and I had actually done some work together, ironically, on some drinking and driving projects, ironically, because the driver that hit Meg was driving drunk that day, which is a sad part of the story. But she sent me that text message, and I said, "Yeah, I know Scott. Why?" And her response was his wife was just hit and killed. And I had never met Meg, but I knew Scott well, loved Scott. And, in an instant when you hear that, you immediately, you start thinking of your own family, your own mortality. Meg had 3 really young kids, which mine were, they're still young, but they were about her kid's age. And, all of that just hit me. Well, and then obviously as stories like that do, it kind of grew in our community, the emotions, and with social media that all, you have an outlet to share all that and pour some of that out. And one of Meg's friends put out on Facebook that day or shortly after, "Hey, this Saturday, why don't we all, wherever you are, just go out and it was kind of targeted at runners. Why don't you all go out and that day just dedicate your miles to Meg?" And so this huge response to that Facebook post was going on. And at the same time, at the site where Meg was hit and killed was people were flooding this spot, hanging running shoes up in this sort of makeshift memorial, which 4 years later still stands there. People still go hang their running shoes. And so I started feeling, this emotion, this let's go out and run for Meg. And so that Saturday, I decided, okay, what the heck? I'm going to go out and just run. So I at that time, who knows what kind of shoes I had. I didn't even know there was such thing as running shoes. And, I was 50 years old, so this wasn't a young guy getting out running for the first time in a long time. It was an older guy who was somewhat inactive. And so I just started running, and it was just me. There were several folks that got together as groups to run with her, different running groups, and, the police team got together. But I just went out and ran by myself. I put some music on. I'm a big listener to Christian music and sort of uplifting. And so I was out there and I just started running. And the next thing I knew, I had run 8 miles and really had fell into some deep reflection. I always say that day, I really just heard God start talking to me, and I started listening a little bit differently. Reflected a lot, obviously, on family. Reflected a lot on this shortness of life that, we never know when our time is done. So what are you doing with your life? And just a lot happened in that 8 miles. And long story short, from that day, I never stopped running. That November, I signed up for my first half marathon, and the Richmond Marathon here in November every year has kind of become a Meg Miles family reunion. Folks flock here from all over the country to run that race in Meg's name and her memory, and in an effort to really build on her legacy. So that November, I ran my first half marathon. And a couple of years later at that same race, I ran my first full marathon. I have since run, I think, a dozen half marathons and a couple of marathons, and I'm now training for my first ultra marathon. So obviously that first run for Meg turned into something much bigger for me. It changed my life in a lot of ways, both physically, spiritually, emotionally. It's taken on a life of its own in me, really.
Well, I know you've taken an interest in Meg Miles and that you're connected to them, but tell me a little bit about how I know you're one of the admins on their social media page. How did you get involved to that level?
I think, one, I love writing, and so I've done a whole series of blog posts, especially in the beginning, about Meg's story and then my running journey and how her life sort of was weaved into that running journey. And then I would share a lot of that on the Meg Miles Facebook page. And just so for folks listening, I went out and ran that Saturday after Meg ran, but I joined over 100,000 in 1 week's time. This Facebook page, which again was very quickly put together as sort of a collective place for folks to share their miles and pictures. In 1 week's time, that page had over 100,000 people there's a map somewhere, every state in our country, and then representatives from almost every country around the world of people who that day went out and ran for Meg. And, when you think about that, and again, from my perspective, I live in small town Hanover County. When you think of somebody in this little town who most of the people did not know, that story resonated with people from all around the world, like I said, over 100,000 people, that's pretty powerful. And so I did a lot of writing and sharing some different things on the Facebook page. And, that's really what the page became, was just a lot of people sharing and accepting one another, developing these friendships. It really has become more of a family than a running group. And I've, over the years now come to know that's really what a lot of running groups are. They become families. But I think at some point we realized that, holy cow, there's an awful lot of people. And to this day, I think there's almost 20,000 people still on the page. But at one point, I think we figured out we need to have 2 or 3 folks kind of leading this thing. And I don't even know how I became picked or volunteered to be one of those, but it was a natural fit because I believe in this group of people. I believe that there's a real opportunity through Meg's legacy to bring people together, to encourage them to be, healthier people, both physically, spiritually, emotionally. And so I took a real interest in it, and do to this day, as I'm still one of the admins. And then, like you said, we had the chance, like your group, to go to this Facebook summit last year in 2017, the first ever community summit that Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg put on, with this belief that being in community is really important to, kind of growing the kind of culture, certainly that we want here in our country. But he really believes worldwide that we can use these communities and start connecting them. And to be one of the 100, groups chosen along with yours to be a part of that was real powerful. But it was a reassurance that, that's the kind of group that I personally want to stay involved in, and to the degree I can have a leadership role in it.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm in the group. I'm in Meg Miles group, and it was my first time I ever heard of running for someone, and I didn't quite get it until I actually did it. And it wasn't too long after that I was matched with River. So Meg Miles was my first experience running for someone, and I didn't quite get it until I actually did it. And then the feeling that you get from that, and the community, even if you're out running those 8 miles by yourself, the feeling of not being alone is so very strong. And it wasn't soon after that I was matched with River, and then I ran for him, and it just all connected for me and made sense, and it is a spirit of community, even though you're running by yourself sometimes. So tell me a little bit about, we met in Chicago, and that was awesome, but you also met Laura Baumgartner, and she's a special needs teacher in Illinois that I think has made a big impression on you. Tell us a little bit about her and that.
Yeah, so it was actually the spring before we went to Chicago. A buddy of mine, Tracy Outlaw, who you met, he's in the picture you sent. He was at the Facebook summit there in Chicago. Tracy, he knew Laura. They grew up in the same area, or somehow they had this connection. And Tracy had supported this Run for Respect that was a big initiative that Laura and her special needs students in Pontiac High School there in Illinois took on. And this Run for Respect, the idea behind it was that, and they partner with Special Olympics out there, the idea behind it was we want to get rid of the R word, and the R word for them is retarded. They don't like to say it. They just call it the R word. And they wanted to not just get rid of it, they wanted to replace it with respect. And so I got to know Laura and her kids a little bit online just by following this Run for Respect, and really started to appreciate Laura's heart for what they were doing. So that year they run a 5K in Illinois, and then they also ask people to run virtually, and they send you a bib to wear when you go out and run your virtual race. So I did that. And so that was kind of it. That was my first exposure to it. Well, then when we were in Chicago, and I don't know how, Laura, they were about 2 hours away, but Tracy got with Laura and made this arrangement that they would come drive to Chicago, and we'd all meet at Starbucks and just get to know each other. So Laura came with 3 of her students, and those 3 boys, they just made a huge impact on my life. It's easy to label folks. And so these kids get labeled as, in the worst case, retarded, but not much better, special needs. I mean, I know we have to use that, I guess, to identify different groups and schools or what have you. But, you know, by the time I got done sitting having coffee, and it was nice to get to know Laura, but as Nick and Mitch and Austin were their names, and we just sat there, young men and me, a man, just drinking coffee, talking about sports. One of them had just this incredible sense of humor, so I listened to his corny jokes and laughed. But, you know, we just sat there and chatted, and I don't know, we spent a couple hours there. And when they left, the question just kept pounding on my heart. Why do they have to fight for respect? They are just delightful kids. And, you know, I guess sometimes it's a oversimplification, too hopeful to adopt this reality that we are all human. And by my belief, we're all humans created by this same God who loves us all equally. And so I left really torn by, these are beautiful kids, and why are they having to put on races? Why are they having to work so hard to promote this seemingly simple concept to me that everybody should be respected and everybody should be loved? And so that meeting them and having those conversations, Run for Respect took on a whole new meaning to me. So this past April, the first Run for Respect after I had a chance to meet them, I just decided that I was going to do something bigger for them. And this year, since it was in April and my birthday's in April, the previous year I did something big in April. I ran 53 laps around a local track because it was my 53rd birthday, and which ended up being a little over a half marathon. But even then I knew I got to do something bigger my next birthday. Well, this birthday I decided, my birthday's on April 27th. I decided that I'd do my big birthday run, and I would do it to promote Laura and her kids and Run for Respect. So I put on my Run for Respect bib, and I took off in town here in Ashland where I live, and I decided I was going to do my longest run ever. And I ran 27 miles that day since my birthday was on the 27th. Wow. And my previous long run had been a marathon, 26.2 miles. And so that's, you know, so I did a lot of Facebook living that day. And so Laura and her kids were in Illinois on Facebook, kind of watching some of my videos and sending cheers along. So I was out there running alone. But to your point a minute ago, when you run for something, you know, Run for Respect, and me more, you know, specifically, I was running for those three young men I met and then their beautiful hearts for this cause. But being able to, I love Facebook, to be able to interact with them at that level while I was out there running, while they were, you know, a time zone away and in school, it was just awesome. And then of course I spent that day and a couple of days leading up to it encouraging folks to register virtually, because then they use this money to pour into their cause and into Special Olympics. And it was just, it was a beautiful day. It was a fun day. It was hard. 27 miles is never easy for me, but it was so worth it to do something big for them. And so obviously then in that moment I started, and I actually did a podcast interview with Laura too. And, you know, from that, as soon as I was done there, I started already brainstorming about, okay, I got to do something bigger for them next year. So that's where I am.
I followed you on that day as well, and so I was hoping you wouldn't feel alone, because 27 miles is far, and it is never easy. I will never say that it's easy. I will say, though, that if it was easy, I'm betting you would find something else to do, because the challenge is what makes it so good. And
you're right.
I know that you're spiritual, you're a man of God, and if you do run and if you do challenge yourself and you take yourself to those places that you've never been, physically, emotionally, spiritually, you just follow along. So I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the spiritual aspect of running and that different level of thinking and prayer that just, I don't know, just kind of opens up when you run. And I'm just from hearing you talk, I know you experienced that. So I'd like to hear a little about that.
Yeah, well, I think it all, when I started running, like I said, with that first run for Meg on that Saturday, I experienced something different. I experienced a hint of how God can speak when you're in a quieter place, when you're in a place of intentionally listening to him, which I had never been. I always say it, what my prayer life was before I started running. It was always, okay, God, I'm here. I want you to listen to me. I have a list of requests. I have a list of needs. Let's open up this one-way prayer line. I talk, you kind of listen. That's right. That's how this is supposed to work. And what I've discovered through running is almost reverse, really, that one, at the core, prayer is very much a two-way piece, but it's not far away from being this one-way piece where we just open up our hearts and our minds and ears and listen to what God wants to do with our life, and with running, what he wants to do through our running journey. For me, it really hit a peak and sent me down a whole new path when I ran that first marathon in Richmond back in 2016. I prepared for it. I didn't have I'm not a good, here's my training plan guy. I've just never been that good with structure to that degree in any part of my life. I have to have some degree of flexibility, but I followed, some basic concepts that I'd get in 2 or 3 decent runs during the week and then a long run on the weekend. I never did get to that 20-mile run that everybody, I guess most plans peak at. I think I got a 19-mile run in. So, I felt fairly prepared. Richmond had a 7-hour time limit. So I thought that I could achieve that. At about mile 20 though, where everybody talks about hitting a wall, I did hit a wall in Richmond, really to the point where I said, I do not have 6 more miles in me. There is no way this is happening. And in that moment, I listen to music when I run, and this song, The Lion and the Lamb, came on. And part of the chorus of that song is, who can stop the Lord Almighty? And it repeats just over, who can stop the Lord Almighty? I'll spare everybody. I won't sing it, but I can hear it right now as it goes. And as I went, I just kept taking one more step. And different songs came on, but I kept hearing that, who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord Almighty? And I think I did, I reflect back on it now. I didn't completely know in that moment. What I know now is that when we get to this place, God always wants us to get to a place where we 100% know we do not have the strength to do the things he's calling us to do. And he loves us getting to a place where we own that I'm done. I've got no more strength. This is not happening on my own. I need some greater power, some greater strength. And, in that day, I realized clearly that I quit talking. I just quit telling God, I need you. I just listened, and he just kept saying, who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop me? And I got about 2 miles out, and three buddies ran out and joined me and ran in the rest of the way with me. They were like angels, and they knew me well enough too. They just walked beside me, which is really important because I'm not a great run with other people. I'm not very coachable. By that, I mean, I don't need anybody running beside me saying, come on, you can do this, or pick it up. Running gets ruined for me if I feel pressured. These guys just walked up and just ran alongside me. And then when I got to the finish line, my 2 boys came running out. And at that time, they were probably 8 and 10 years old, maybe 7 and 9. And you know it. Those finishes are always so emotional no matter what. I'd been fighting it off the whole way. But when you see your two kids run out, man, I
Mm-hmm.
lost it. And then this whole Meg Miles family ran to the finish line with me. Must have been 30 folks. We just ran together in this big mob of people. It was, you know, probably one of the most memorable moments in my life outside of those boys of mine being born and being married. And, you know, I crossed that finish line, and that day I ran with the scripture on my back, 2 Timothy 4:7. You know, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I've kept the faith. And in the race, I really wasn't aware that scripture was on my back. But when I crossed that finish line, I knew that this whole running thing was about to take on something really different, something that wasn't about me. You know, you line up to run a marathon to check it off like a bucket list. You want to accomplish something big, personal in your life. But through a whisper or through some more direct conversation and really tied to that scripture on my back, God was telling me that this is more about him than about me. And I think a lot of it was just that faith and that reliance on him in the middle of that race when I could not have done it without him. And then just seeing this parallel in life with people who are struggling with different areas of their life that maybe it isn't running, maybe it's relationships, maybe it's a disease, maybe it's just health, maybe, I don't know. We all have these struggles. I've come to believe we all have some sort of darkness that we're fighting. And, you know, I think God was saying that here's your opportunity to use running to bring some light, bring some hope, bring some strength, help people finish whatever race it is they're fighting for. Bring them this fight that you have found in running through whatever it is, stories, interviewing people like you, Jodi, who share their passion and their fight for different people and different causes. If we can bring that to other people, that's what God was saying, very much in line with what Paul was saying to Timothy in that letter when he shared that scripture. You know, he was telling Timothy, hey, you're in for a long road, buddy. You know, I'm handing over this preaching gig to you. You're just this young kid. You're going to meet all sorts of challenges. But, you know, he told him, I have fought the good fight. I've finished this race and I've kept the faith. And really in sharing that letter with him, he's saying, I think you can do this too. I have faith in you. And that's really what I want to do with this podcast that you're hosting today, and just through these incredible stories that all come from my running journey and crazy, just looking back all to, you know, this young woman that I didn't even know getting hit and killed, who not coincidentally was a strong faith Christian woman who devoted most of her life to being a mom and serving others in her church. And I think I always consider what I'm doing part of building on that legacy of hers and carrying on this life that she was living, touching lives that she no longer can, but very symbolically running ahead with that spirit of hers and running ahead with that spirit of giving. I always consider it an honor to be able to do that, really.
I have to tell you, I love your story and how the Bible verse, 2 Timothy 4:7, ties into the whole story, and that it's the title of your podcast. I just love how that fits in there. It's like it was perfectly placed. Following your journey, I mean, you can't help but to follow you and to get pulled in, because you're very inspirational. And so I've been, you know, at first we became friends on Facebook and I started following what you were doing. But little by little, I was just like drawn to, you know, what can I do? How can I get involved? How can little old me, you know, 800 miles away, get involved and help him to do what he's doing, to lift him? And so I want to know, how can we help you? I know that the Run for Respect 5K has a virtual option, and so we can all sign up for that. And I'll post the link here with this so that it's easy to get to for people. But there are some other ways that we can join you, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I always say first and foremost, prayer. I believe in the power of prayer, so just pray over this journey I'm on. I do have, a website, TwoTim47.com, so folks can TWOTIM spelled out 47.com. And there I write blog posts that I hope are inspiring and really share a lot of this running journey. That's where these podcasts are kept, in addition to iTunes and Podbean, I think some other places. And then, I do have a group of folks that partner with me financially on a monthly basis. It's through a site called Patreon. And if you go to the website, you can click on the Support Me tab, and it'll take you in and talk all about Patreon. And so folks support me at different levels, and then I try to do some different things, recognize them on social media, recognize them as sponsors on podcasts, and do different things. And, my whole thing with that is that financial backing allows me to, go do different races and collect different stories, reach out in some different ways, and, pursue a dream that I can do this, devote more time to it. Currently work, a full-time job and a part-time job. So someday, I'd like to weed out the part-time job and spend more time doing this. And this is really just gathering these stories, having conversations like this, putting them together in a way that, people can hear them well and be moved by them. And, just sharing these stories is another way folks can support, listen, read, and share with others. And, more and more folks seem to be drawn into it, which really makes me feel good. But like I said, this is God working through me and in my running, which I don't consider running to be a gift of mine. Running is an opportunity I have. I get out and I grind through it. I love the opportunity to do it. But I think, my gifts are God's given me, this gift of communicating, to be able to write and to speak. And I love doing that and just want to honor him with that. And so that's how folks can get involved.
I really believe in the community service that you're doing and all of the awareness that you're raising. But part of it for me is that you're really bringing runners together. And, there are so many of us that have stories. I always imagine like a runner running with a backpack on, and every backpack they're carrying a different story with them. And some of their stories are light and some of their stories are heavy. And when you do things like you do, you pull together the family of runners. And again, in a sport where, not really a team sport, you're kind of alone. The best part of that is that you just don't feel alone. And when you get to listen to a podcast and someone like you that's sharing these stories of other runners and what they're experiencing and what they've been through and what they're trying to do, you can you can reach out to that person. You can not feel alone. We feel like we're in a better place as runners when we have someone like you that's sharing these stories. And so that's just a huge, huge service, I think, that maybe is overlooked. Maybe you've overlooked that. It's just so awesome.
Well, and I feel blessed to be able to do it because, it is so cool. I say this all the time in any race, whether it's a 5K all the way up to whatever it is, ultra marathon. There's a very small percentage of the folks in that race whose story is about potentially winning that race, right? There's very few people who are lining up in any given race thinking this might be my day when I stand on the podium and get first, second, third place. The rest of the folks are in there for some other story. And, I just know me, right? My story is tied to running for Meg, and then it's progressed into running for Respect, and, recently ran for the hurricane victims in Houston. Whatever I can do to have a story that's helping. But I'm just like one guy. And some of these races, one guy amongst tens of thousands. And every time I'm out there running, you know, I'm wondering, what's her story or what's his story?
Exactly.
And to be able to dig into that. And again, I met you in Chicago and kind of got familiar with the whole I Run For, and, you know, you and I got connected because I went home and started researching you. I was like, I love Facebook. You can stalk people. And
right.
I came across an article tied to the New York City Marathon, which I thought was about the upcoming one. And it highlighted you and River in that story. And I just got fascinated by what you were doing for River, and then reached out to you and found out that was from the previous year. But, it allowed you and I to be able to connect and have some discussion about what does it mean to run with a purpose. And so for me to have this opportunity to dig into those stories and share those stories, to hopefully encourage other people to run for greater purpose, to find a greater purpose in running. And also, you know, a lot of these, it's been fascinating to me as I talk with people about their stories who are often running for somebody else, that a lot of folks are running to kind of overcome or to battle some of the own challenges that they've had in their life. I find it fascinating that people take up running a lot of times to conquer challenges in their own life, and then that transitions into them supporting and helping somebody else conquer something in their life. That's very much been my experience. And it's fascinating to, like I said, I've done, I don't know, 60 interviews now, and almost every one of them, I never reach out to these folks to tell about how they use running to overcome their own challenges in life. But 80% of the conversations end up touching on that. And these are all people who are now inspiring and motivating other people. So it's the fascinating piece about running and running with a purpose.
Right. That's amazing. Recently, I just read your most, I believe it's your most current blog post, and the title of it is 7 Marathons in 7 Days for River for Respect. Yeah. So when I first read that, I thought it was a typo, because 7 marathons in 7 days, my friend.
Yes.
But no, it's not. It's for real. So but I was really moved. Of course, I was moved by the For River part. I really like that. I just thought maybe you could tell us a little bit about your plans for that. And that seems like a pretty huge undertaking.
It is. It absolutely is. And it is, again, it just goes back this whole running journey, and we all have our own sort of individual story in it. So, you know, it really started as last year at some point. I interviewed on my podcast a fellow by the name of J.P. Cottle. He lives actually here in Virginia, and he did what they call the World Marathon journey or tour or something. They do a marathon 7 straight days on 7 different continents. So they go hit a marathon on every continent 7 straight days. So you can just imagine the nightmare that is, just the flying and the logistics of it. And after I interviewed him and he, you know, recounted this journey, you know, those are sort of the crazy things that I hear and think, wonder what I could do close to that. There was no way I knew I was going to be going 7 continents, 7 days. But you hear folks like, and I'm just one of those guys that my interest gets piqued into, wonder what I'm capable of. So that whole 7 and 7 thing kept, I don't know, it stirred in the back of my mind, where it stayed for a long time, really, until, like I said already, I'd already been kind of dreaming about what I could do for the Run for Respect next year. And all of these things are rolling around in my mind when you reached out and expressed an interest in using your Run to Jodi's House half marathon, which you do every year, and expressed an interest in, you donate every year to a charity or to a cause, and you said you wanted to TwoTim47 to benefit from that, which touched me. And I was, you know, moved by that. but then I started thinking, okay, well, what can I do then to make that? I'm always like looking for the next story to it. And I wanted to link it to, if you're going to do something big, let's link that to something big. And so again, I talked about the Run for Respect and Laura, and you and Laura, you could be sisters, really. Your hearts certainly are sisters, because as she promotes this Run for Respect, that's really what you're doing with River. You met this kid, you saw the completely beautiful human side to him, and I know it frustrates you, it works on you like it does me, to think, why should this kid, because he's battling spina bifida, why should he have to fight for love and respect? And so you get out there and you promote River, you raise awareness to do whatever we can to help find the answer to spina bifida. But it was just this passion you have for him. And then I thought about Laura. And so I thought, okay, and this is me out running. And now I know a lot of these stirrings. There's some days I hear stirrings and I think, okay, Keith, that's just your crazy idea. And then and it's forgotten. But then there's some things keep stirring. I'm like, oh God, this is God's idea. He really wants me to go run 7 marathons in 7 days and weave all this story of his together, which is you and River, Laura and her kids, and then TwoTim47. And again, I've met all of you really and interviewed all of you, JP, Laura, and you on this podcast, 3 separate stories, but just this opportunity to bring them all together. And in a big way, I think in a way that hopefully will allow me to be some different places, bring some awareness to Run for Respect and to River and to you and Laura's beautiful hearts. So I thought this is a good way to do that. And, I think it's very symbolic too that, God has put a lot of different passions on all of our hearts. We all have different gifts, different passions, and we're all one way or another kind of out there doing our own thing, going our own way. But it is God's desire that these stories all get weaved together. And I think we have a responsibility some days in being the weavers of that, figuring out where we can work together, where we can enter into each other's lives and help each other. And so that's part of this too, is just, I think there's some beautiful stories here that can become one, and then in doing so point to God, who I think ultimately authors it all.
Well, you have our support completely. River and I are both very excited to dedicate I have a small half marathon run across town, and I do have a virtual option, so people can join in there. All proceeds are going to you and to your cause and to TwoTim47.com. And I just think it's going to be awesome. I'm honored to be a part of that, and I invite everyone to join in and register for the virtual. So it will be like we're all there with you, so
Absolutely.
that you're not alone.
Absolutely, and I can't wait. And so, when you told me this, and your race is November 11th, and of course my first thought was, I need to go look and see how I can get down there to run this thing. Well, I quickly realized, wait a minute, I'm registered to run the Richmond Full Marathon on November 10th, which logistically, getting to Florida after that would be a nightmare.
Right.
So I will be registering and running virtually, and I will be doing it on the 11th. So I'll run the full marathon in Richmond on Saturday, and then the half marathon the next morning with you all virtually here in
awesome.
Richmond. So that's what some people said. Are you crazy? I said, well, let me tell you, running a full marathon, getting up to run a half marathon is still much, much less than running 7 marathons in 7 days. So it'll just be tinkering with that whole feat.
That's right. This is good training for you.
Absolutely. It'll kick it off.
Right?
That's what I've said. That's going to be the kickoff for the 7 days training.
Right. And a decade ago, if someone had said, let me show you your future.
You are out of your mind, is what I said.
Exactly.
You are. I mean, yeah.
I love that.
Run a
I love
marathon.
That. I love how God works in our lives.
Oh, you just never, and and I say that all the time, that I've come to see that. And even with this 7 and 7, we're sitting here having this conversation right now about how we're going to work together and partner with Laura, and we're going to do some beautiful things. And there's no doubt about that. But I also know there is something completely unforeseen and unpredictably beautiful that God's going to do with this that we can't even begin to anticipate at this time.
I agree, and I get to be a part of that, and my running team and the people that are going to do my race get to be a part of it, and all the virtual runners, and River gets to be a part of it as well. And so from all of us, I thank you, because you've inspired us and you've pulled us in, and now not only do you get to have this journey and we get to watch, but we get to actually participate in your journey. And what kind of gift is that? That's the best gift you could give anyone. So I thank you.
No, I thank you. And like I said, it's no accident, Jodi, that you and I are having this conversation, that we've become dear friends, and that we were in Chicago together. I just admire your passion, your spirit. It is that you're just the kind of people I want to be around. You're the kind of person that gets blamed because I end up taking on ideas like this, because you just spend some time around you really feel like you can get out and tackle things. And more importantly, you make people want to. So it's a definitely mutual admiration. I love the folks that support you and hang out with you. You've got a good tribe of folks. So I'm happy that this is
Thank
a partnership so much.
So it's also exciting. I'm going to make sure that the links are posted so that people can register to run virtually the 13 miles, the half marathon, and the 5K, and so that we can all be with you on your journey and be a part of that. And it has been an absolute delight talking to you this morning.
Oh, this has been fun. You'll have to come back.
Thank you for being on my show.
I am grateful that we got to do this. This was it was a fun way to do it. Thank you.
Okay, well, you have a good weekend, and thank you again. I really had a lot of fun with this.
I did too. We did good. We're a good team. I can't wait to keep working with you.
We are a good team.
All right. Jodi, have a great day.
Have a good weekend.
Tell Jean hey.
Okay, I will.
See ya.
I will. Bye-bye.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Jodi Stoner. I know I enjoyed being on the receiving end of the questions, a little bit more of a hot seat there than it is when you're the guy firing the questions off. But I thought Jodi did a great job just digging into this shared vision, this shared mission we've got going forward, and tackling some pretty big things together, and just promoting love and respect for everybody. Certainly we'll have River at the heart of that. We'll have those young kids out there in Pontiac, Illinois, and Laura Baumgartner, their teacher, at the heart of it. And like I said, we've got some ideas. Certainly Jodi's going to be running her Run to Jodi's House half marathon to support TwoTim47.com, and I appreciate that. I'm in turn going to use the money she raises to help promote this Run for Respect and do this crazy 7 marathons in 7 days to help really magnify that support. And then, Laura Baumgartner and her students, they've got their own Run for Respect 5K going on out there that will point a lot of this towards, but 3 very separate things that we're going to allow God just to weave them all together into one big adventure. And I thought Jodi did a really, really good job of drawing out what that's going to look like and what's at the heart of it, and how we kind of both got drawn into this together. So I appreciated that time with her. I always love talking with Jodi Stoner. She's got a spirit about her, and certainly I think that all came out as she fired away the questions instead of answering them today. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you will follow us along. A lot of big things to come up to definitely support Jodi's race in November, and then later, this year into next year, we'll start focusing on the 7 and 7 marathons in 7 days. And certainly the next April 2019, the Run for Respect in Pontiac, Illinois will be encouraging everybody to sign up and run that virtually and make this year's Run for Respect the biggest one ever. I think Laura and I are really on a shared vision for that. Let's just make this year's Run for Respect the biggest one ever and go a long way towards eliminating that R word retarded, replace it with respect, and at the same time, just promote this idea that really everybody out there deserves this unconditional love and respect. At least have that as a starting point. So I thank you again for joining in today. Rachel Wood, thank you again for sponsoring today's episode. I hope you'll come back next time. If you're out there running this week, run hard. If you're not, get out there and maybe cheer somebody on, encourage them in their running journey. And if running's not your deal, then I hope you'll keep coming back. I think stories like Jodi and I talked about today, they really tap into a stronger sense of spirituality, probably emotional and health wellness, and maybe running is one way for you to get there. And if not, certainly look for all other ways to support you to get there, to get to that best you. And until next time, y'all have a great week.